We begin with a question: what does it mean to be free? Freedom is often celebrated as the pinnacle of human experience, a gift, a birthright, a treasure. But what if it's also a burden? What if the infinite possibilities of freedom paralyze us? What if the responsibility of freedom turns us into its prisoners? And what does it mean when we choose to reject it entirely? Simone de Beauvoir, one of the great existentialist philosophers, once wrote that freedom is inescapable. Even when we try to run from it, we are making a choice, and that choice is itself an act of freedom. But here's the paradox: some of us are terrified of freedom. Some of us look upon the vast, open expanse of possibility and feel nothing but dread. In this fear, we shrink, we deny, we cling to anything that will give us certainty, absolution, or an escape from responsibility. This denial of freedom, this retreat from the terrifying ambiguity of existence, is what Beauvoir calls the path of the subhuman. Now, before we go deeper, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like life was happening to you rather than you happening to life? Have you ever avoided making a choice because it felt too overwhelming, too risky, too uncertain? If so, you felt the pull of the subhuman. And trust me, it's a pull we've all felt. But why? Why would we deny the very thing that makes us human? Beauvoir argues that life is inherently ambiguous. We are free to shape our lives, but we are also bound by limitations: our biology, our social circumstances, the random chaos of the universe. This tension between freedom and limitation is the essence of human existence. It is the ambiguity of being both a subject who acts and an object who is acted upon. And it is this ambiguity that terrifies the subhuman. The subhuman retreats from freedom because freedom demands responsibility. To be free means to confront the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. It means accepting that there is no inherent meaning, no divine script, no one-size-fits-all guide to life. It means owning our choices and the consequences that come with them. For the subhuman, this is too much to bear. They would rather live passively, letting others or circumstances dictate their path. But here's the catch: by denying their freedom, they also deny their humanity.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
So what does it mean to live as a subhuman? It means living without purpose, without authenticity, without engagement. It means drifting through life like a leaf in the wind, carried by forces beyond your control. It means numbing yourself with distractions, endless scrolling, mindless entertainment, shallow pursuits. It means blaming your circumstances, your genetics, your upbringing, or society for everything you lack. It means saying, "It's not my fault. It's out of my hands, but is it? Is it really?" Let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, am I living authentically, or am I hiding from my own freedom? Am I making choices, or am I letting life make choices for me? Am I creating meaning, or am I waiting for someone else to hand it to me? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Now, let's consider the other side of the coin, the potential dangers of denying freedom. Beauvoir warns that the subhuman is not merely a passive figure. Their denial of freedom makes them susceptible to manipulation. Without a sense of self, they are easily absorbed into ideologies, movements, or systems that promise certainty. They become tools in someone else's agenda, pawns in a game they neither understand nor control. History is full of examples: the lynch mobs, the witch hunts, the blind followers of oppressive regimes. These are not the actions of free individuals. These are the actions of those who have surrendered their agency, their responsibility, their humanity. But let's not demonize the subhuman. Let's not pretend that we are immune to their plight. Because the truth is, we all have the capacity to fall into this state. We all have moments when the weight of freedom feels unbearable, when the chaos of life feels meaningless, when the temptation to retreat is overwhelming. And that's okay. What matters is what we do next. So how do we confront the existential crisis of being subhuman? How do we reclaim our freedom? How do we step into the ambiguity of existence without being consumed by it? These are the questions we will explore in the next part. But before we continue, I want to leave you with this. If freedom is both a gift and a burden, how do you choose to carry it? Will you embrace it with all its uncertainty and responsibility, or will you deny it, and in doing so, deny yourself? Let's look at another way people avoid freedom, by pretending it doesn't exist. Unlike the subhuman, who drifts aimlessly, the serious person locks themselves into a rigid structure of meaning. They don't reject life outright. Instead, they cling to something external, an ideology, a role, a belief system, and elevate it to the status of absolute truth. This, they believe, will give their life certainty, purpose, and value. But is it really that simple? Or is it just another form of escape? Here's the trick that the serious person plays on themselves by devoting their life to something larger. They claim to transcend their own insignificance. Whether it's religion, politics, career, family, or even the pursuit of wealth, the serious person convinces themselves that this external cause is what gives life meaning. But in doing so, they abandon their own subjectivity. They surrender their freedom to think, to question, to doubt. They become, as Beauvoir describes, an instrument of their chosen system rather than a free individual who shapes their own values. Think of someone who identifies completely with their job. They don't just work at a company, they are the company. Every decision they make, every word they speak, every belief they hold is filtered through the lens of their corporate identity. The company's mission becomes their mission. The company's values become their values. They're not just working for a paycheck, they're living for a purpose that they didn't create. But what happens when that purpose is taken away? What happens when the company folds or they lose their job? Their identity collapses, and with it, their sense of meaning. They've built their life on a foundation they don't control. This is the serious person's greatest vulnerability. They tie their existence to something external, something fragile. It might feel like stability, but it's an illusion. And when that illusion breaks, the serious person is left with nothing. They've spent so long outsourcing their freedom to external values that they've forgotten how to live without them. They're terrified of confronting life on their own terms because they've never done it before. Why do people choose this path? Because it feels safe. The ambiguity of freedom is terrifying. The serious person solves this problem by pretending that ambiguity doesn't exist. They cling to their chosen system, whether it's a religion, a political ideology, a cultural tradition, or even a personal goal, and treat it as an absolute truth. They don't question it, because questioning would mean confronting the fact that it's not absolute, that it's just one of many possible ways to live. And if it's not absolute, then they're back to square one, faced with the terrifying reality of freedom. Think about the way people argue over politics or religion. How often do you see someone defend their beliefs with genuine curiosity, openness, or humility? Rarely. Most of the time, they dig in their heels, double down, and refuse to listen. Why? Because their beliefs aren't just opinions, they're the foundation of their identity. To question those beliefs would be to question themselves. The serious person cannot afford to do that, because their entire sense of meaning is built on the assumption that their beliefs are unquestionable. But here's the problem: no belief system, no role, no external structure can ever fully account for the complexity of life. The world is messy, chaotic, and unpredictable. When the serious person encounters something that doesn't fit their framework, when reality contradicts their beliefs, they face a crisis. They can either adapt, which means admitting that their framework is flawed, or they can double down, ignoring or denying anything that challenges their worldview. Most choose the latter. This is why the serious person is so often rigid, dogmatic, and intolerant. They're not defending their beliefs, they're defending themselves from the chaos of freedom. Beauvoir warns that this rigidity can be dangerous. The serious person isn't just a harmless believer, they're a potential fanatic. When someone believes that their chosen system is absolute, they're willing to sacrifice anything for it, including the humanity of others. History is full of examples: religious crusades, political purges, cultural revolutions. These are the works of serious people who believed that their cause justified any means. They weren't acting out of malice, they were acting out of fear. Fear of freedom, of ambiguity, of uncertainty. And in their fear, they became instruments of oppression. But let's not forget the quieter forms of seriousness. Not everyone becomes a zealot or a tyrant. Most serious people live ordinary, unremarkable lives, following the rules, playing their roles, and never questioning whether those roles are worth playing. They're not dangerous to others, but they're dangerous to themselves. They sacrifice their authenticity, their individuality, their freedom, in exchange for the comfort of certainty. They live as if life is a script, and their only job is to follow it. But who wrote the script? And why are they so afraid to deviate from it? Let's pause for a moment and consider this: how much of what you believe, value, or pursue is truly your own? How much of it comes from you, and how much comes from the roles you've been assigned, the systems you've been taught to serve, the beliefs you've inherited? If those roles, systems, or beliefs were taken away tomorrow, what would be left of you? Would you still know who you are, or would you feel lost? The serious person avoids these questions by immersing themselves in their chosen system. They mistake submission for purpose, obedience for meaning, certainty for freedom. But there's a paradox here: the more they cling to their system, the less free they become. They lose the ability to think critically, to act authentically, to live fully. They become, as Beauvoir puts it, a slave to the object, and in their slavery, they deny not only their own freedom but the freedom of others. They impose their system on the world, not because it's right, but because they need it to be right. But here's the thing: no one is born a serious person. It's a choice, even if it doesn't feel like one. And it's a choice that can be unmade. The serious person can learn to confront the ambiguity of freedom, to accept that life has no easy answers, to create meaning rather than consume it. But this requires courage, the courage to let go of certainty, to embrace responsibility, to live without guarantees. So where does this leave us? If the subhuman rejects freedom by drifting passively, and the serious person rejects freedom by clinging to absolutes, what's the alternative? How do we live authentically in a world without ready-made meaning? How do we navigate the tension between freedom and limitation without falling into denial or despair? These are the questions we'll address in the next part. But before we go any further, consider this: if everything you believe and value were stripped away, what would you choose to hold on to? What would you choose to create? And would you have the courage to choose at all? So now we're here, staring directly at the heart of the problem. Freedom is terrifying, but it's also inescapable. Denying it doesn't make it disappear. Whether you drift aimlessly like the subhuman or grip tightly to external systems like the serious person, you're still making a choice. And if that's true, then the question isn't whether you're free, it's what you're doing with that freedom. Are you using it, or are you wasting it? Are you creating something real, or are you hiding behind distractions and systems that let you off the hook? Simone de Beauvoir believed there was a way out of this mess. She called it authenticity. To live authentically means embracing your freedom without running from it or burying it under someone else's values. But this isn't about finding yourself in some cheap, self-help book kind of way. There's no pre-written real you waiting to be discovered. You're not a finished product hidden beneath layers of doubt and fear. You're a work in progress. That's the point. Authenticity isn't about discovering some eternal truth about who you are. It's about making choices that reflect the fact that your life is yours to create. But let's not romanticize this. Authenticity isn't easy. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling of being true to yourself. It's hard work. It's messy. And it comes with consequences. When you choose authentically, you accept responsibility not just for your choices, but for the impact those choices have on the world around you. Beauvoir was clear on this: freedom isn't just about doing whatever you want. Freedom comes with responsibility because your actions don't happen in a vacuum. They ripple outward, affecting others in ways you can't always predict or control. This is where things get complicated. Some people think freedom means being untouchable, isolated, above it all. But that's not how life works. You don't exist in some bubble where your choices concern only you. You're part of the world and the world is part of you. Authenticity means owning this fact. It means recognizing that your freedom is tied to the freedom of others. And it means acting in ways that don't just preserve your freedom but expand it for yourself and for the people around you. Let's break this down. Imagine you're in a situation where you have to make a choice. It doesn't matter what the specifics are, what matters is that the choice is yours. You can take the easy way out, blame someone else, or pretend the choice doesn't matter. That's denial. Or you can make the choice, own it, and accept whatever comes next. That's authenticity. But here's the catch: authenticity doesn't guarantee a happy ending. It doesn't mean everything will work out the way you want. Sometimes the consequences of your choices will be painful or unfair. But even then, you'll know that you're living on your own terms, not someone else's. This is where responsibility comes in. When you make an authentic choice, you don't just do it for yourself. You do it knowing that your actions shape the world. Think of it like this: every choice you make sends a signal. It shows others what's possible, what's acceptable, what matters. When you live authentically, you become an example not because you're trying to, but because that's how freedom works. Your freedom gives others permission to claim their own. And when you deny your freedom, you set the stage for others to do the same. But let's not sugarcoat it. This isn't a path of certainty or safety. Authenticity requires courage. It means stepping into the unknown, making mistakes, and sometimes failing spectacularly. It means being vulnerable, exposed, and accountable. It means giving up the comfort of absolutes and accepting that life is ambiguous, uncertain, and unpredictable. But what's the alternative? Living as a subhuman, passively waiting for life to happen to you. Living as a serious person, desperately clinging to values that aren't even your own. That's not living, that's existing. And you deserve more than that. Now let's talk about something that often gets misunderstood. Freedom doesn't mean rejecting everything that came before you. It doesn't mean tearing down every belief, tradition, or system in a fit of rebellious nihilism. That's not freedom, that's just another form of denial. Authenticity isn't about destroying the past, it's about engaging with it critically. It's about taking what works, discarding what doesn't, and building something new. You're not obligated to follow the rules, but you're also not obligated to break them. The point is that the choice is yours. But there's a danger here, and Beauvoir was very clear about it. Freedom doesn't mean selfishness. It's not about putting yourself above everyone else or indulging every whim just because you can. That's not freedom, that's immaturity. Real freedom requires maturity. It requires understanding that your actions have consequences, that your freedom is tied to the freedom of others, and that living authentically means taking responsibility for the world you're helping to create. So where does this leave us? If freedom is ambiguous, if life has no inherent meaning, if authenticity requires constant effort and responsibility, then what's the point? Why not just give up and let someone else make the decisions? Why not retreat into the safety of distraction or ideology? Because deep down, you already know the answer, it's not enough. You've felt it before, that nagging sense that there's more to life than this, that you're capable of more, that you want something real, even if you're not sure what it is. That's your freedom calling. And while it might be terrifying, it's also the most precious thing you have. Here's the truth: no one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you a manual for how to live your life. And even if they did, it wouldn't be yours. You have to choose. You have to create. You have to take responsibility, not just for your own life, but for the world you're helping to shape. This isn't about becoming perfect or solving all of life's problems. It's about living honestly, authentically, and courageously, knowing that the choices you make matter. But let's not stop there. Let's ask something even harder: what happens if you don't? What happens if you choose passivity, denial, or rigidity? What happens if you let fear govern your choices? If you let someone else's values dictate your actions? If you let life pass you by while you sit on the sidelines? The answer is simple: nothing. Nothing happens. Nothing changes. And that, more than anything, is the real tragedy. So here's the challenge: live. Not just exist, not just survive, but live. Use your freedom. Own it. Shape it. And when things fall apart, when you make mistakes, when the world pushes back, don't retreat. Keep going. Because the alternative is to deny the only thing that makes life worth living: the fact that it's yours.